Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Left of Greg podcast. I know we've had a little bit of time off here. Sorry not to push anything out recently, but I've had a few personally very busy weeks with getting married and going on a honeymoon. So yeah, so there was that big life-changing event, which was awesome, which was fun. It was a big party. So we're trying to get back into things here, and once again today it's just gonna be myself, Brian Marin, and Mr. Greg Williams, who of course the podcast is affectionately named after. Just want to remind everyone starting off, if you guys ever want more information, just go to the website, www.arcadiacognerati.com. Depending on where you're viewing this or listening to this, the link should be right there to take you to the website. There's plenty more information. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. We're pushing out content all the time, all kinds of great stuff for you guys to read. And we'll have a lot more quick videos coming up soon too, as we get back into the swing of things here. So I apologize for not being as present as normal, but did have some significant life events that were a blast, and I'm
well,
very
Brian, to be frank and honest, you spent a lot of time. You had to go through all of your emails and websites and everything and change your last name. So that was a, a significant amount of time that happened, folks.
Well, look, you know, she said, look, this is an income issue. If I make more income, you take my last name. So I said, okay.
Exactly. And she had to meet you. So that took a couple of days. You get what I'm trying to say?
Well, there was all right. So
you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. We'll just go ahead and jump right in. So today we're going to be talking about just going through what is HBPR&A, what is human behavior pattern recognition and analysis. We kind of talked about briefly, actually, you, myself, and Teach, Will Atkinson, did one of our first podcasts on it, but there were some video issues, so we couldn't post that. But the audio one is up on the website. But I kind of want to deep dive it just with you now being kind of you created this system. Anyone want to know more about Greg, link is in the bio. You can find out all about him. I'm sure a lot of you already listening have actually probably heard of him or seen him speak. So without getting into that, I kind of want you just to, first of all, define what is HBPR&A, what is human behavior pattern recognition analysis, and why did you call it that, right? So what is it, you know, and then why did you come up with that name?
Okay. So anything that's influenced by a human being will have the smell, the feel, the touch, the sense of a human on it. So when I found it hard to explain, or I used profiling, it would be immediate turnoff to people.
Right.
If you say "holy cow" today, you'll piss off the religious right and the United Dairy Growers of America.
Right.
Which, so you got to be real.
That's my mom's side of the family, Wisconsin.
There you go. So the cheeseheads.
Yep.
And yeah. But the idea is that people don't understand that on their computer they have a profile. On their Dropbox they have a profile. A profile is what makes you you. And you can be a lot of like other people, but there are defining moments. There are fingerprints that you leave all over the place, latent and theoretical fingerprints, or psychological influences that you leave around in your wake. So the idea is that a human has to emplace a bomb, or a human puts down the bipods and decides he's going to shoot Martin Luther King Jr., or a human decides that they're going to walk into a school on a certain day and shoot or kill a bunch of people. So that human chose a method, a weapon, a person, an event, a vehicle. And when they made that choice, all of the balls, you know, you ever been to Pizza Hut or one of them places that has those balls for the kids where you can climb in that little pool and stuff? Yeah, exactly. Well, the state actually mandates that you can't anymore. But the idea is that if you think about those balls, when you see the little kids playing in the balls, each one of those balls, it's a wave, it's a particle, it's moving in a frequency a wave and away from the center, and it's causing little ripples to go out all over the place. Well, just like Kirlian photography, you can read that if you're tuned into the right frequency. Human beings betray their affiliations. Human beings betray what they're about to do next. So the idea is, one, that's where the human part comes in. And I talk about damaged humans all the time, and people go, why do you do that? Because in cop work, if you have to testify, you can't say, oh, well, Jim smoked a joint or whatever else is going on. It's, you have to be very formal about it. Well, then when you go to science, you have to be very specific and use scientific terminology, or people think you're a mope. So the idea is that humans mean humans plus behavior. So human behavior is different than anything that happens accidentally. Anything outside of that sphere, it means that it's intentional, and intent is hugely important in determining the likelihood that this person means to do you harm. Because if you can't determine the human potential for that behavior, then what you're doing is just narrating a TV show with the sound off. So then the second part of that is pattern recognition. So HBPR. Pattern recognition is because all human beings follow patterns.
Right.
If you take a look at your own life, Brian, and you say, well, not your life, most normal humans that aren't under the bridge, thankfully you had a double wide cardboard box. You have a dog now too, I believe.
The train went by right as you were bringing that under the bridge.
Isn't that wonderful? So that's wonderful. The set that you've got behind you ripples when the wind blows too. It's all painted onto a bed sheet. But the idea, Brian, is that every human being that's listening or watching or just tuned out because they thought that was insulting in some manner, what happens is they set patterns too. You get up at the same time of day. That's your circadian rhythm screaming at you. You urinate or defecate during the same periods unless you're sick. You have the same normal body temperature. If you're too hot or too cold, you're sick or hypothermic. You will leave and follow the same route to the place that you're going. You like a certain restaurant more than others. You have a favorite meal. You have a time you like to go to dinner. You have shows in the evening that you like to watch. Now, if we protract that out, if we take a bigger or a micro or macro look at all of those things that makes you unique, that's more important than just the fingerprint. It's your sociological and psychological imprint. And then the final one is, so we've got humans, human behavior, how they react, pattern recognition, then the ampersand, and then the last one is analysis. What do you do with it? Well, not all information is ever going to meet the threshold of intelligence, but the idea is that all that information helps me put into file folders to define you. So now I can go out there in a marketplace with 1,000 people in it and go, that's my guy. Or that small group of people working together is the ones that I want to talk to, or are the ones that I want to investigate.
Well, okay. So on the whole human behavior patterns, and you brought up a number of issues, and I think that people follow patterns more so than they even realize, right?
Oh, yes.
For a number of reasons, right? So you can get into how the brain chemistry works, how your catecholamines work, and why you do it. The simple answer is humans are lazy, right? And we just, once we find the fastest way to work, we take it every day. Yep. Once we find the latest time I can set my alarm to go off to get everything done,
that's your new normal, baby.
And if I wake up 20 minutes late one day and I still make it on time, now I have a new normal, just because it's that much easier, right? Yep. So this pattern. And I think a lot of people can understand it. Okay, yes, we all set patterns. There's pattern recognition. When it comes to the difficult part, I think, or the complicated part, I say complicated because it's not complex. There's a set of rules we can use for the analysis portion, right?
Yes.
So I think a lot of times that's where people either go wrong, which is where you brought up profiling. So human behavior pattern recognition and analysis is a scientific term for understanding and analyzing what people do. Well, if we can't call that profiling or a profile, because people automatically say, oh, well, that's racial profiling, or that's religious profile, or gender profile, whatever.
Just because they don't completely understand it, but you're right.
Right. From lack of understanding. Because, as you would say, judging someone based on the color of their skin or their religion or sexual orientation, that doesn't tell you about their behavior, which is what we care about, right?
Precisely.
So you can't make a determination solely on one factor. That would be unscientific and one-dimensional. So the analysis part, and this is kind of where I think your system comes into play and why it's so good. You talked about a lot of things. You talked about things being a wave and a particle, right? And so this isn't just humans and psychology and the way we think. This is a little bit more to that. There's a lot more hard sciences, I think, involved in it too.
Well, so let's do that for just a second. The idea is that if you choose to go against what your human behavior catecholamine group, let's say, your electrochemical neurotransmitters are telling you to do, it's hard. So, for example, if you're going to lie, your hypothalamus heats up, your episodic saliva goes away, and then you start licking the side of your mouth, and you'll get a big gulp because you don't have any more moisture in your mouth. Those cues, and I gave you 2, I could give you 700. The idea is that each one of those, I could testify to a jury, and the listeners at home or the people that are watching us go, wow, I just saw that. I've seen myself do that. So then you have to do an analysis. So the comparison is this. There are other things. I have a sore throat. I got a frog in my throat. I got those. So now what we have to do is we have to take a bandwidth of scientific certitude, and we have to say, these are the knowns, and these are the unknowns, and we have to compare them against a baseline for normalcy based on the exterior schema, the exterior confounds, the things that are happening in that person's life at that time and at that place they're being observed. We conduct then a comparison on the behavior that we're witnessing, the likely behavior we should be expecting, and guess what? If it's incongruent, we might have something. And I say might because this is where ML and MD-COA come in. So it's not unscientific, it's all science. And as a matter of fact, you're taught that anything less than 3 cues doesn't form a cluster, they don't coalesce, and you have to disregard that information. You have to write it down and keep on moving smartly. Just that, if the readers, if the watchers just understood those points, they would nod their head and go, wow, that's something I could testify to. It's legal, it's moral, and it's ethical.
Well, so to go back to that then, kind of, because we kind of touched on the word profiling, but what is it, what do you think it is that people misunderstand about it? What is it?
So here's the thing. You've heard
not necessarily about profiling, about when we talk about any threat or person or anything. Why? Because I see it with people where they'll go, oh, they're picking up on indicators, and I'm like, oh, this person's observant, and then they jump to some conclusion that's almost ridiculous.
So hurrying to an unreasonable conclusion is putting a round peg into a square hole. And not only is it unscientific, it's going to take you in spirals that are going to cost you money. They're going to get you sued. They're going to miss the suspect. A cop spends so much time trying to make the crime fit the suspect. I know it's Jimmy, that guy down at the beach. The idea is let the evidence lead you to a reasonable conclusion. Don't rush to an unreasonable one. So if I had a shoe impression, or if I had a tool impression, or if I was looking at some other piece of evidence, we talked about fingerprint analysis, the loops, the worlds, the deltas. If I had enough of those information to bring in front of a jury to say, this means that the person we're watching, beyond a doubt, Colonel Plum in the library with the musket. Okay, everybody in a jury nods their head, and the judge bangs a gavel. So why can't we do that with human behavior? Well, I've been doing it longer than any of these self-proclaimed experts in it, because what I do is I say, if you take a look at all of these things, artifacts and evidence, they support my reasonable conclusion that this behavior is going on in front of us. Now, if we compare that behavior, then I can provide you with information that this is what's likely going to happen next. And that's where I make my believers. Because as we're watching, and Brian, you were one, as we were watching incidents unfold on the streets where it was a highly charged kinetic environment with a lot of actors and a lot of bad things that are going on, we could pick the individuals out and say, he's not my threat, she is. This vehicle is non-threatening, but that one's likely an IED. That's what separates our program from all others, is the HBPR&A leads to a reasonable conclusion reinforced by artifacts and evidence.
Okay, and that's so, yeah, again, you brought up one thing I think is important to hit on too, is context, right? The context in which you view the situation is going to change the relevance of that observation, right?
Yep.
So the context is everything, right? And I think that gets into, the big debate or argument, and it's tough when you have a lot of career law enforcement professionals, not to bash on law enforcement, or career whatever, talking about, these different shootings that happen and saying, hey, you just can't predict them. The only thing that's going to stop them, which is drives them nuts, because it sucks, because the public looks at this person as, you're the subject matter expert on it. If you're telling me these can't be predicted, well, then I'm scared, and I don't make good decisions when I'm scared. So I'm going to come up with likely, irrational or illogical solutions to a problem like this. And so I think the context is extremely important. And I got one example just because it popped in my head.
Yeah.
When I was on my honeymoon, I decided we did some camping out in Big Bear, and then
That's called being homeless, Brian.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
Look,
Own it.
Look, And then we went to Santa Barbara for a couple days because it's kind of like a, you know, quieter, really, really beautiful area up just north of LA, right on the
A lot
coast.
of meth.
Yeah. So that's inland, actually. Way to drive through those areas. So we're there, but I went there partially, same reason with the Big Bear, not a lot of people, right? I wanted to kind of something little, you know, low key. And we're there and they're like, oh, I'm like, hey, I'm seeing all this confetti and stuff on the street and all these people all over the place. And so I go talk to the valet guy at the hotel and he's like, oh yeah, this is Fiesta weekend. It's our busiest weekend of the year. And I'm going, oh, great.
Brilliant planning.
So, yeah. So I'm walking down the street and, you know, McKaylee's out there, you know, recording some of the, you know, parade going by, and we're walking and it's like noon. So, you know, I've already started celebrating this honeymoon, you know, had a few drinks in me. We're walking down, and there I see, you know, people watching the parade, people out there selling their wares, these little things you can get. And then a guy just pushing a cart with a bunch of bags in it right down, stopped me dead in the tracks because it was what, and then I instantly, before I had processed the scene and gone, okay, this is not a serious situation. So then I go, well, I got to investigate it anyway. And I looked at it and it was literally scruffy looking guy, mission focused, not looking at the parade, not looking at anyone walking by, pushing a cart. And it wasn't even a shopping cart. It was almost like a cart that you only get at like airports. You know, they've got it comes down and it's straight out and you stack your luggage
cart. Yeah.
And so that looked odd to me. And I looked on it and it had his bags and it had his skateboard on it and it had a whole bunch of other stuff. So I walked around him, take a look in front of him. Yeah, he had mission focus. This guy, I don't know what kind of drug interaction he was on at the time.
So
mental health issue.
He went from a bomber because he
right away
a template for it.
It's like it went from Tsarnaev brothers to this is the bum on the street who's moving his stuff around, and that's all it was. But it's so quick. But how many people?
But you did that
yes,
because you were trained to do that. So,
right.
So let me quiz you. And first of all, that's an incredible analogy. That's a great one. Let me do this. If a fireman can't get through your front door, he's going to use a Halligan tool. So he knows that he can't boot the door. He gets the tool to do it. If the cops are going to go to that same house, they're actually going to put a cable on the front and hook it to their ram and yank it off the hinges, right? The armor guard's going to go skittling across the street. Brian, if a copper on the street is pinned down by indirect fire or direct fire, who's he going to call? He's going to call a SWAT team. If a Marine needs help, he's going to call Artie or air assets or anything else. We all understand that. We understand when we need to go get mom because something has gone wrong. But when it comes to human behavior, we think we're the experts, and we're afraid to concede that we need more training. We have taken a giant evolutionary leap forward with communications tools and electronics and computers, and the cell phone now is more powerful than the computers that they used on the moon landing. The problem is that it's not made us smarter. It's made us socially more awkward. It's harder for us to read human signals. Mom knows which baby is hers. Okay, you know that that's the cry associated with going poop or I'm hungry. Those are the behaviors that we're talking about that create the bedrock. Somebody said, oh, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That doesn't help me determine who the school shooter is going to be. But when I take a look at human behavior and I analyze a repeat, then I look at that repeat and say, if he did it 1, 2, 3, or she did it 5, 6, 7, then 8 is likely going to be the same thing. And then when I see the particles and the waves start to coalesce towards that, I can be left of bang. So in other words, I don't have to see the entire incident unfold. I can create an explanatory storyline that fits what's likely to occur. And if the behavior I'm watching starts going down that path, then guess what? I can step in and I can cut that fuse burning before it gets to that cartoon stick of dynamite. That's what we're talking about. And police officers aren't trained to do this skill, nor is the TSA. We know the SPOT program was a failure. And guess what? I'm better at it than anybody else in the world. Challenge me. Come get some. Okay? And I know how to teach it. And that was a good thing. I 16-ounce gloves in an old factory, and guess what? I'm good at one thing in my entire life. Everything else is a failure. Look at my hair. Look at this suit. Look at my weight, okay? But on that one thing, I can tell what humans are going to do next. And, Brian, that appealed to you in your job, and you learned the skill. So what I'm saying is you can export it. That's the difference. HBPR&A isn't something that only people in an ivory tower can do. I'm a street guy. If a
Right.
street guy can do it, anybody can do it.
And
And lawyers and judges and doctors, they understand it. It's science all the time.
right, and it brings us right back to how you broke down human behavior pattern recognition. Okay, that's very intuitive. I think a lot of people can do that. Where like I said, it comes in as the analysis. So what current, you turn on any of the news stations, I don't care what you watch, and you got the talking heads on there. You've got different federal agencies putting out information, and people are really trying to solve different problems. How do we solve these problems of mass shooters, school shooters, what they're calling lone wolf, all these, different issues, suicide, how do we combat these issues? And I think where the water gets a little muddy is in the analysis portion, right? Because you have people come in that go, well, it's, a white male between this age, and he's going to do that. And that's great if you could just write these 10 things down on this yellow pad here, and this is all I got to look for.
Yep.
But it's a little bit more difficult than that. But it's actually much more intuitive than that, because I might not understand those things, but I understand normal human behavior. So I know, with those issues I brought up, how can HBPR&A, if I understand that skill set, how is that going to, one, help me identify someone who's going to go into a Walmart and start killing people, and I can use that same, you're saying I can use that same skill set to identify, my family member who's likely to commit suicide.
I am absolutely challenging the audience, telling everybody that yes, that is true.
Well, how do you do that?
So
or how
here's
does that
the thing.
work?
Here's the thing. If you just based that question on something as simple as congruence, anger cues are something we could codify. We could say these 7, 8, 9 things are anger cues. Anger is expected in certain circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
If I saw a level of anger, the fist and down, I'm telling you one thing, okay, if we saw that behavior, even at a distance, even through a pair of binos, even at a click out, that set against the backdrop is either going to tell us, wow, dad's really mad at the kid, or that boss is really mad at that guy. It's going to tell us a story. If the story that we're seeing is incongruent with the signal, now we see that the baseline is an HR director's office. And while she's in there going and pulling the file on that person, we see outside that that person is given anger cues, and they tipped over a desk and they threw some stuff down. They go in and they slam the door. Well, I'm going to start hitting the buzzer, because whatever that is has created a threshold now. This person has gone beyond that threshold, and they might be angry at Tim down there who just ran over his foot, but there's anger to a point where we're now at a decision. And that decision means I have to go in and de-escalate a little bit and find out what's going on. Now, guess who's not in on this? HR. Because she's in there. She was looking through the file, and all she heard was the door slam. So she's coming in late. So she's got to be able to take a look at those cues that she has in nanoseconds and decide, highly agitated male in my proxemic space, I must step behind the counter to create distance, because the gift of time and distance. So wherever you are in this little vignette that I just came up with out of my immense head, you, if you know more, will be able to do more. But if you go in and you wait till the shots are fired, then you're at bang. And when you're at bang, then anything that happens now is a roll of the flipping dice, and you're all in all the time, and it's going to be chaos. It's going to be flipping pandalarium. It's going to be pandemonium. It was a shout out for Jones. He used to say that all the time. But the idea is, Brian, if we can give people the gift of time and distance by telling them one thing, just an anger cue in this situation could do this. Now, add to that the other lens. Boom. Now we've got, instead of domains, we've got the 7-step terrorist planning cycle. Both of the people that you were bringing up this weekend was a series of horrific shootings over the weekend. One in Dayton, one in Dallas. And the idea, if you take a look at those, both left El Paso, Texas, rather. Both left a trail of breadcrumbs behind, saying, "Look at me, I'm a damaged human being. I'm going to act out." People missed them. They didn't put the breadcrumbs together. Why? Because they did the human pattern recognition, but they didn't do the analysis. Therefore, the information was dusty on a shelf and didn't do anything. Did they conduct surveillance of those locations? Yes. Both of the people were familiar with it. Our school shooters shooting schools up. Yeah, you know why? Because they're familiar with it. They spend so much time there. They know that they're going to have a captive audience. Why do you think the Aurora shooting was a palpable target? Because I know that people were going to be sitting down in the dark, and it's easy to throw in a distraction device and start shooting. So now we've got a different lens. So I go to training and I learn human behavior. Then I learn pattern recognition analysis through a lens of 7-step. Then I learn context and relevance. Now I've got 3 things that I can use, and then somebody comes up and they tell me I'm grabbing something off my desk. I have to be able to take the knowns and the unknowns and line them up against a baseline and come up with artifacts and evidence in support of a reasonable conclusion. And then a person says, okay, well, what are the rules of evidence? All of those particulates come together for a trained person in nanoseconds. Your brain already wants to make those connections. That's why word searches and that gosh damn Where's Waldo are so exciting to people. We want to repeat that. You said it at the very beginning of the broadcast. When I do something fun, my prefrontal cortex, my limbic system, they work together and go, that was really cool. Boom, 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 dopamine. I want to repeat that behavior. So then when I drive by, let's say I love, Thanksgiving, I drive by and I see a turkey on a gosh damn billboard on the highway, immediately I start to salivate. My brain chemistry is already saying turkey good, okay? You get that same thing if you go to the gym all the time. I'm back at the gym, slow moving. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not full speed at the gym, but the clothes are a little looser. And guess what? I get the same excitement from a ham that I do from the gym. So if I want to lose more weight, I better find that electrochemical neurotransmitter that gives me the release. And guess what? When I run more, I miss it. So I do things I like when I run. I read and I listen to music, okay? I think about that next lessons learned. And so now when I don't run, guess what? My brain gives me the guilty signal. It starts feeding me music. And I go, why am I hearing that song? Oh, I haven't run yet this morning. You get what I'm trying to say? You do it. You work out all the time. You can be trained.
And that's the thing with patterns, which what people call habits, which is just simply a pattern.
It's a pattern.
It literally is a pattern of behavior. And
truly is.
So if you do, you're talking about positive, habits that people do. Once you start doing it, the more you do it, the harder it is to not do it. So it actually becomes difficult to no longer, like same thing with me. People are like, oh, you're always getting up at 5 a.m. to work out. Like you must be super motivated. I go, no, I hate going to the gym. I go, but I have to go. I have to go. And if I wait to the end of the day, I'll make up an excuse. But if I get up first thing in the morning, I got no excuses. I have to go.
Exactly right.
Just building a habit.
So wait a minute. Now you touched on something, Brian, that I want to link. We were talking about suicidal behavior before. Now, we know that in certain humans, a baseline maneuver that might draw one's attention is cutting, because cutting is something I can own. I can own that feeling. I do the cutting. It's like I was talking about my brother-in-law, Craig, the other day, and he's a member of a motorcycle gang. And it's funny because he's a loner. He's the least likely person that you'd ever see leading a club doing anything. And you go, well, how can he be a member of this large group? It gives him the anonymity he needs. Yeah, he's a member of the group, but nobody talks to him because he's wearing a full face helmet all the time. Yeah. So when you take a look at that specific behavior of cutting, why do I repeat cutting? Because I was in control and I love the way it feels after I cut. I cut because that pain goes away. I control how much pain, I control the local pain, I can control how long it lasts. And guess what? Negative attention is attention nonetheless. So what we can do is the same cues that you use to make you work out and be in great shape and can run marathons and stuff, I can use to be a violent, dangerous felon. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It's a different side of that same coin.
Right.
So human behavior and pattern recognition and analysis can be used for good to determine a bad person spiraling out of control, a person that's likely to do suicide, a pedophile that's going after your kid. It can be used for all those things. Why? Because it looks for incongruent signals in the baseline of a specific human. And that's why you asked about the racial profiling. Okay, we got to follow this guy because he's black. What? Okay, where is the science or the logic behind that? So somebody tells me, hey, when I was teaching at the FBI National Academy, and I won't tell you the people, but they came up and I was in disguise during the training, and they came up to me and they said, so you're Jewish? And I said, no, I'm Arabic. And I heard what you guys said about Muslims. And they were like, oh my gosh, that's so hard. listen, if you're not going to say it out in public in front of everybody else,
Yeah.
keep it to yourself and change your behavior. Because what you're doing is you're looking down this lens and saying, oh, I see. So that Muslim person was a terrorist. That black person was a shoplifter. The Chinese woman was a bad driver. What that is that's a stereotypical mold that you learned from cartoons or books or people or bad parenting or whatever that you learned, and you're applying it non-scientifically to evidence that's in front of you. Look at the evidence. This person's good or they're bad. They should be here at night. I see a person jogging at night with a dog. They're checking their watch. They're doing everything right. I flip the scout car over and I follow the guy for a while. I get a surveillance unit on him. As soon as he's out of the sight, he ties off the dog, goes in the back window. He's a burglar. He's putting the stuff in the alley. Then he goes and he runs with his dog till he gets his car, goes back and picks up the stuff. He showed you enough to make you calm down, and then he went over and burgled. Why was it important? Who runs with their dog at 2:30 in the morning?
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody's getting out of the bar or doing this. So when incongruent information is visible or available, you can draw reasonable conclusions that it's either most likely, which means I don't have to watch it anymore, or most dangerous, which means I have to dial down a little bit. And guess what? Leopard can't change its spots. So people over time, they might quit smoking, but they're not going to lose the craving. You get what I'm saying? So these people, like the Dayton shooter getting thrown out of school for the same damaged human tricks, okay, that should have been a warning signal for the rest of his life, not saying, oh, he's much better now. Yeah, people can be cured. I'm not saying that there's not a way to be cured, but what I'm saying is that person continued that downward spiral, 9-inch nails, and somebody should have seen it. Everybody pays when you don't say what you see.
Right, and one of the things you keep mentioning, I think it's good to tie it back to the analysis, is when you talk about incongruence. I think that's what a lot of people miss. So there's always this analysis, of course, after these events, and then it continues at the next one, and it continues after the next shooting, and everyone's got to put their 2 cents in and say, well, he's this, and you know, there's what, you know, obviously angers me bitterly when they say there's no way to tell this stuff is going to happen, because it's simply not true. But I know that from experience, from learning and how to see things, and then doing correct predictive analysis to where you're right so many more times than you're wrong. And that's all it really comes down to. And I think that's the issue, because I know we've had other podcasts on it, so folks can always listen to what we talk about motive, but that gets really roped in there of why, because like we said, people fear what we don't understand. So everyone goes, well, why would they want to do this? Well, why? And then that goes down a rabbit hole of whether they were, you know, hey, they had a horrible upbringing and were abused as a child and they're acting out, or they were motivated by literature they read online, and we need to shut that down.
Exactly what I was trying to talk about. Brian, let's compare this to an analogy near and dear to my heart. You know, Shelley and I had the ranch for 13 years. It was a great thing to come back from being deployed forward and be able to take people on horse rides, jeep tours, raft trips. So we have this one trail that goes up to what we call the Supper Canyon. It's a very winding turn, and what we'd surprise everybody is there was a way to hike in, and we'd have their dinner waiting for them after this strenuous ride up there, and a guy playing a guitar and stuff. So it was really a mind screw, but it was wonderful, right? But this ride was a ride where you had to be on that horse, man. And we didn't have no dude string, so you rode that horse. So if you didn't understand horse behavior, for example, if you're going down a trail and you've got a big steep wall on your right-hand side, and the trail is about, you know, a foot wide, and on your left you got some scree, and it drops off into a canyon. If you go down there, you're likely to die. You're definitely seriously injured. The horse will probably have to be put down, and you're going to at least be in the emergency room and most likely die. So what the horse is going to do on that trail is the horse is going to walk as close to the edge as possible, because the horse needs to see, it needs to measure the edge. You might as well get used to it. That horse ain't going to walk over to the right where it can't see that edge, because it always thinks that there's a pterodactyl or a T-Rex or something coming for it. That's why when your hat blows off, the horse rears, because it's going, yikes, something's going to come, because horses were predated forever, right? So what I would see is these riders telling me that they're experienced. They tighten that rein, that bit's coming up in the mouth, and the next thing, they're on the mane, and they're trying to steer that horse. Well, what's that horse want to do the whole time? It wants to step to the ledge. Why am I telling you that story? One, you can't fight what's going to happen in human behavior. You just got to go with it. And if you learn it, then you can anticipate and not be excited by it when it happens. And the other thing is, if one of them horses ain't doing that, you got something wrong with that horse, and he's about to throw you or kick you. So why can't we apply that country standard to a human being? This human being's behavior is incongruent. Look, there's a lot of people online spouting hate, and haters go away.
There's
And there's
been people throughout history who are going to do
throughout
that.
history. And you know what? They're going to blame religion, and religion says thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
And the guess what? When we take a look at the Quran, it says if you kill one of us, you kill all of us. So don't do it. So every message that they want, they'll find something. Like in this broadcast, there's going to be somebody saying, "Oh, he said this and he meant that." Don't put words into my mouth. What I'm telling you is we all set patterns. And we can read those patterns over time and even in nanoseconds and determine what's likely going to happen next. And if we go down a certain path, we can nip it in the bud and use this imaginary pair of scissors and stop where we're going. Or we can leave it alone because it's not going to impact anybody. And guess what? That de-escalation portion of HBPR&A is critical because, you know, you see bad things happen. There was a video on this weekend that one of the readers or one of our frequent listeners sent in about the female getting arrested in some small town for the vehicle damage. And oh my gosh, the response was so incongruent with what's normal. That's what people put on the news to churn our stomachs and to get ad space. I'm telling you, each one of these incidents can be predicted if you apply the lenses of HBPR&A. 6573, when we're taking a look at it, when we look at spec and we look at SPAR, all the stuff that you learn, that you're trained to do are going to help you no matter what environment you're likely to go into.
Right. And I think I kind of want to almost like demystify it a little bit. I know we always try to do that, right? So a lot of these guys who do this or write books or come on and do the shows, and it's like, you know, they try to make it like it's all, hey, this is some super high level, super secret
ninja
school,
stuff.
big brain ninja stuff. Like, you know, it's like, no, it's not. It's intuitive. You just said it right there. I can walk out my door, look around, or go to my kid's school, or go to the Walmart, go to the grocery store, and go, hey, incongruence. Okay, am I seeing any incongruent signals? Meaning,
yes.
What's wrong with this picture? Is there something here that shouldn't be here, or is there something not here that should be here? Right.
Precisely.
You walk into that bank door and you don't see anyone standing there and something smells a little funny. Yeah, you might have just walked into that armed robbery, but it's,
that's no ATM, that's the outhouse.
Yeah. So it's all, I think, just looking for that incongruence, because what I like about what you've developed is that it's intuitive, right? So I don't have to be big brain, super smart person to get it. One, and two, my life experiences that I've already have likely given me the file folders necessary. I just have to learn how to articulate it and really just observe it and go, hey, wait a minute, this looks a little funny. I don't understand why this person is standing there. And just taking that extra second, you know, it's that, you know, you're in the park, and that's what, you know, the photos
going around the block.
Hey,
taking an extra second. You're right on. Hit that.
And that can get difficult to do just with everyone's lives and how busy we are, and we're always looking at our phones, and we get overwhelmed and we can't pay attention.
No. Because what you're trying to tell me there is you're trying to say you want to be the first person at the homicide. You're going to be the first person, and you're going to record your own. Listen. How much of a hurry are you going to be in? Are you going to be in such a hurry that you're going to forget to check your parachute? You're going to forget your ruck. You're going to forget
I think that's a better, and I think that's a better takeaway out of all of these shootings, all of these events that occur, than anything that any politician or pundit or ideologue wants to get on there and spout, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. The takeaway is that, okay, look, you can observe these things. So one, there's some law enforcement professionals that I'm very unhappy with, because they're going on there saying you can't predict these things, that's not true. But
they can't, and they don't want to say that.
But it's not their job.
And we got a badge.
It's not their job to be out there doing like that. That's not what they're hired to do. That's not even in their job description. Hey, you're going to go. It takes every one of us. It's your personal, security is your personal responsibility. And I think just like what I was getting to with what you said is that, hey, what is it worth to you? Are you in that much of a hurry for whatever it is that you're doing right now that it's worth your life? Because that's what it is. I mean, almost no one wants to kill you. You're actually more likely to kill yourself than have ever be a victim of a homicide. I think suicide is number 10 leading cause of death in the U.S. The rest is usually, heart disease and a whole bunch of other medical issues. But in the event that these things happen, you can walk into it and you can be, what we don't want people to do is don't be a contributing factor to your homicide.
To that point, another prediction from the big guy. We are going to see a lot of people injured or killed fleeing from a scene that they think is in progress because they haven't gotten the training, but they certainly have the news that's blasting it down our throat every day. And so you're going to be in a mall, and you know what? Somebody's going to drop a tray at the restaurant, and somebody's going to go gun, and then everybody's going to stampede, and they're going to run over little Jimmy. People
or pull out and start shooting.
Training. Well, and here's the other thing. If you pull out a gat and you're standing in front of me and I don't know who you are and I see you waving around a gun, something's going to happen right there. So that's the other part of that. That's going to be a dangerous situation. You're not going to solve this situation by getting more violent. What you got to do and harden the target, putting up more balustrades and putting off these, restricted entries and stuff. What they're going to find out is somebody needs CPR and they're going to die because they couldn't get through. One of the shootings, remember Virginia Beach, the big problem that they had is the emergency services couldn't get in the key card.
Yeah,
so that delayed them. Listen, there's too much security sometimes. What you got to do is you got to have a cordon of cognition. You have to be able to read the environment and say, I'm not going to the mall today because it feels hanky. There is a reason for that hinky feeling. There's a reason a cop gets that, hackles and butterflies in her stomach for an actor. Go to training and find out what those are, because I can tell you every one of them. And then use those, Brian, when you analyze that restaurant, when you analyze that parking spot. So you can be safer. You can be a harder target, right? And then the other thing is, these guys got to get out of their car and go into the thing. And people are talking about time and how many shots that are fired and everything else. I don't know. If I see a guy with a bazooka heading into the Dairy Queen, I'm running, or I'm going to call somebody, or I'm going to do something about it. There's heroes out there every day, and those are the heroes that say something. A police officer would rather come to your house 70 times for nothing than at one time for somebody being dead. So use those systems that are out there. Use these. Assess what you're seeing and do something about it. That's people just are doing this the whole time, and they're looking at their cell phone and they're not paying attention to them.
We say it's personal responsibility, because I think
it is your responsibility.
I think it was either I don't know which shooting it was over the weekend, but I think it was that the police were there and had shot the guy, I think within a minute.
That's Dayton. Dayton's amazing.
Within a minute, that's what we pay for. That's what their job is, right? They can't be on every street corner, and you don't want police on every street corner. Or
coming in and looking in your house, and sizing you up and following you around all the place.
We have civil liberties in this country, and so they it's on everyone's personal responsibility, I think, to go, well, how can I contribute? What can I contribute to my community, my family? Start there. Start with yourself. You make yourself and your family safer. Well, you then just increase the overall security and awareness of everyone you encounter.
And it takes almost nothing and very little time. Another prediction for you, Brian, the shooter in Dayton, his sister was one of the victims. And listen, we're not making light of any victims. These are horrible incidents. What we're saying is we can be better than this as a country. And as a human being, you have the obligation to be better and not allow this to happen. I'll take you back to Whitman, the Texas Tower shooting. He killed his mom before he went out and killed everybody else. If you think that this shooter accidentally killed his sister, no. Well, he didn't want to leave a legacy behind. He didn't want her saying, oh, my brother crapped in his pants and he used to write stuff on the walls. Adam Lanza killed his mom before he went. That's trigger motions. These are things you can see if you look for them.
And that was the other thing, that the police officer there, or the chief of police or whatever, came out and said, we don't know why he'd want to shoot his own sister. And I'm like, I could think of a dozen right now off the top of my head.
Even if I loved her. Even if I loved my sister, I can't have somebody telling my story left over. Take a look at Cho. Cho had to die. Cho's message at Virginia Tech would have been meaningless had he not died at the scene. Okay, so oppose that to the Aurora theater shooting. He had to get caught, because had he not been caught, he couldn't tell his message. So the psychology of the offender, at bang and right of bang, it's intent, it's not motive. So stop looking for it. But left of bang, they left cues. You think this kid in El Paso didn't spout hate to everybody? You think that there wasn't messages in one day? You remember the Kreutzer plan?
Down on
Ed,
U.S.
Ed,
Army.
Ed Bragg.
Fort Bragg, yeah.
When he was driving around, he would tell all of the soldiers that were with him, one day I'm going to pull this 7-ton up on the curb and I'm going to drive down these people. One day I'm going to show up and during PT, I'm going to gun down everybody. And what did he do? He did exactly that.
Well, it's the same.
People hear things. These are pre-event indications. They just don't know what to do with that.
Part that comes down with pattern recognition analysis. It's the same thing with that young, I can't remember his name, actor years ago who committed suicide. And everyone's on set. He's going, one of these days, I'm just going to, he kept those just listening, pointing my finger to my head like a gun motion. And how did he end up killing himself? Exactly the way he described it and exactly the way he showed it. So
hindsight is 20/20. What I'm telling you is if you slow down time, first of all, you can't save time, okay? You can slow it down or you can speed it up. And your ability to take a look at a situation and just gain a few seconds while an event is in progress, while it's developing, can save a lot of lives. And that's what I'm all about. People are going to die. Guns are going to be around. There were school shootings since there were guns and there were school. And before that, guess what? There were school stabbings. And before that, there were school clubbings when they had it in a cave. Yeah. Those type of things aren't going to end because there's always going to be a broken human at the end of that club. But what we can do is we can deny them terrain. Snipers need terrain. So if I obscure it with smoke, I'm denying that sniper terrain. If I'm shooting back at that sniper and not giving him a clear target picture and his spotter can't see me because I'm moving and I'm using cover and concealment, I'm denying him terrain. If I cordon off that street and now start to search for him, he's got to start worrying. That's what we have to do to these damaged humans. We have to deny them the terrain. And the terrain they want schools, they want malls, they want theaters where they've got a captive audience and a lot of people doing what? Shopping and not paying attention. There was thousands of people in that Walmart. And you, Brian, and I, and Shelley were in that Walmart. That's where we were buying our props for the courses that we did down for JTF.
El Paso several times.
We love El Paso.
We love that. I love that
city. Shout out to Joe Weber and his beautiful mom and Tim. They're all from Dayton, and we're feeling your pain, Dayton. We're feeling your pain.
I mean, and so I guess to kind of what can someone do right now? All right, I'm listening to this podcast, and you guys are talking about this human behavior stuff. What can I do right now when this thing is over and I take these headphones off, or I take off turn off YouTube or whatever, I walk away from my computer. How do I do it? What can I do right now with no training, just listening? Okay. How do I do this?
Okay, so first I'll give you the answer that is going to sound horrible because it's going to sound self-serving. The idea is get thee to the website because there's a bunch of challenges and ideas on the website. There's podcasts like these that can train your brain. There's also lessons learned that go a long way around the house, but they train your brain. They get you thinking along these lines. That's critical. Call us. We'll come and train your folks up. If you don't have the money, we won't charge you anything. If you got the money, we're going to charge you a lot of money to come there, but it's going to make you smart. It's going to make you smart and hard and fast. It's going to harden your facility, and it's going to soften your heart, and it's going to open your eyes. But if nothing else, if there's absolutely nothing else, and you decide I'm not going to do anything, I want to improve myself, but I don't want to take the steps or pay any money to do it, then you know what? There's a lot of great books that are out there. The way that to learn about other humans is studying stuff like sociology and psychology, because then you understand what incongruent human behavior looks like. If you don't want to invest that much time, just don't go out of your house. Go in a basement and be a gosh damn mushroom. I cannot imagine that if somebody out there had a problem like this, that they wouldn't want to solve it. That's why we're going out there and we're yelling at the NRA and we're getting politicians. I'm saying this: human, heal thyself. Go out there and get the training that you need, whether that's training inside, which is what we do, or training outside like martial arts or shooting skills or whatever you think is going to make you a harder target. And guess what? Compassion allows you to read other humans' emotions. So being able to look around and have empathy for other human beings means you're looking at them. And by looking at them, guess what? You're likely to sense when something is wrong. You can't sense that on a phone. There's no gosh damn app to do that. And that's why in-person training is so expensive, Brian. And that's why people turn away. They're going, wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, well, you know what? You're going to pay one way or the other.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out where that money's going to come from.
You're definitely going to pay one way or the other. So I'd rather pay up front to prevent it. But yeah, I mean, and you went over some great stuff. Incongruence. What's the most likely, what's the most dangerous course of action from what I'm observing right now? that's what I tell people. What does the emotion fit the event? What's likely? All right. What am I trying to do?
So then take yourself out of that event. Because if you get cues that something is different today and it's not a holiday and you can't easily explain what that is, then that's denial, baby. Take yourself out of that situation. Put the kids back in the car seat and go home.
Yeah, go to a different McDonald's. No, exactly.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Right. Well, that's all I've got. So I think we can. It's a good point to kind of bring it in on. So if anyone wants more information, obviously you can go to the website arcadiacognerati.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're watching on here. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, share. Questions and comments are always welcome. So I think we want to do another podcast in the future shortly here where we kind of pick apart a specific case study or stuff. I've got some suggestions from some of the listeners and stuff that people want to hear about. We'll figure it out and do one on that. But again, if anyone has wants any more information, please website, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. We're on everywhere trying to get the message out. So please share with your friends and be safe.
So a couple of quick shout outs. Brian, congratulations on your wedding. I'm so proud of you. That's a wonderful next phase of your life. Quick shout out to teacher with a little jawbreaker. That's her call sign right now, Jawbreaker Actual. So we love you, Teach. Do great things. And real quick, Chris Gideons came back up on the net. Chris, contact us. Thanks for all that you've done for our freedom. Thanks, everybody out there.
All right. Thanks, everyone.